Hey everybody, it's Dominic here from the Break It Down Show doing today's intro. Today's guest is Spencer Coursen. He is a threat management expert, founder of the Coursen Security Group, and the author of the best-selling book, The Safety Trap, A Security Expert's Secrets for Staying Safe in a Dangerous World. He's a combat veteran, former supervisory special agent, and he provides vulnerability assessments, security consultation, and protective strategy to help organizations, public figures, and private families to stay safe. Along with Pete A. Turner, today's co-hosts are John Leon Guerrero, Shelley Klingerman, who also works in the security business focusing on females. Make sure you also buy her book, Vigilance, The Savvy Woman's Guide to Personal Safety, Self-Protection Measures, and Countermeasures. You simply know what to do. Ride for the brave. Go to savethebrave.org and support these fellas. We fight together PTSD. If you want to support our show, go to the PayPal link, put a little money in it. All the money goes straight back to the show. Check out our website. It's breakitdownshow.com. You can find our merch there, or you can simply subscribe. You can also find us at YouTube, probably the best place to listen and watch us there. All right, enough of me. Here comes Spencer Coursen.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
My name is Spencer Coursen, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yes, indeed. We have John coming in here in a minute. John, by the way, he's like my co-founder of the show, and he's co-hosted hundreds and hundreds of these things with me. He's actually in the security business also, and actually he's popping into the screen now. We also have Shelley Klingerman, who I know through a number of different ways, but we go back a couple of years now.
We do.
Yeah, and she also works in the security business in terms of focusing on females as clients and what females can do specifically and trying to do that. We've done a couple of these shows with a number of different people. And of course, today we have Spencer Coursen on the show. I'm going to bring John in because he is also going to sit in with us. Hey, John.
Hey.
I like your studio.
Yeah. I'm working in the field today.
That's probably the most soundproof location you have available, right?
Well, you know, the first place that I chose to park was great for lighting, but I was right next to the mechanical for a commercial building, and I realized, man, that thing's making a lot of noise. So yeah, you guys both know how it is though to be in the field, and we make it work.
I have used my truck and or a government issued vehicle as my mobile command center / hotel many times.
Yeah. Not to mention restroom.
Very important.
That happens a lot. So you both have great books. And I don't know if Pete mentioned this, but right now the audiobook version of The Safety Trap is coming out in May, and you can pre-order it on Audible, and it'll drop right in your queue when it releases.
It is. I just got done recording it 2 weeks ago. And if writing a book is a challenge, recording your own words as an audiobook is an even bigger challenge. I wound up putting some of the outtakes on my Instagram feed because you're trying to get the inflection right, you're trying to get the phrasing right, you're trying to get the words just exactly as they are, printed on the page. And as a writer, you're always like naturally editing yourself. And there's this one snippet where I'm just going, and being a protector is a craft. Being a protector. And then I look, and then I just like take a sip of water, and I can hear like the producer in my ear, and I was like, "Listen, you would think if I wrote these words that I'd be able to say them with a bit more professionalism." But yeah, I recorded the audiobook myself. It was important to me that I got to record my own audiobook because I wanted the reader to hear my voice in their head instead of whatever other voice may be curated by their own consciousness. But yes, the audiobook, the Kindle, and the hardcover all come out on May 18th. It is available for pre-order now wherever your favorite books are sold: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, Kmart, your favorite local bookstore. And I really appreciate you guys having me on today to talk about protective strategies to help everyone succeed in staying safe.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on. I don't know if Pete mentioned this, but I am a California PPO myself. I have a security company out here. We concentrate a lot more on doing the details and little less.
Protective details?
Yeah, and would like more to do the preventative stuff because everybody, I mean, like, like you profess, it's when we are all feeling safest that we're the most vulnerable, but, we can prepare. And I think that there's a lot of under preparation going on. And Shelley knows that as well.
Yeah. And then for those who are listening that maybe don't know the difference between like the detail work and the work you just referenced of Spencer's, can you describe that? Just the difference, the detail work and the preparation?
I'll let you do that, Spencer.
Sure. So, I grew up. I mean, I spent some time in the military, and then as I moved into diplomatic security, and then public figures, celebrities, sports stars, models, more, what have you. So, being a protective agent, running a protective detail is the quintessential Secret Service model, the bodyguard model. What you would think it's the guys in the dark suit with the earpieces and the sunglasses who are moving that person who is either under a threat or who is being protected from portal to portal, from point A to point B, staying with them while they're giving their speech or doing their book signing, or they're on the movie set, or they're filming the TV show, or they're interacting with the public, doing the advanced work to make sure that they are safe in that location from point A to point B, during, and then back home again. Whereas threat management, or the more protective practices, is kind of what I do now, which is providing people with the how to look at what the most realistic risks are you are most likely to face, and then how to put the safeguards in place to keep that risk from becoming a reality.
Right.
And one of the reasons that I made the shift from being a protective agent to being a threat management was when the tragedy at Sandy Hook happened. Both of my parents were teachers. I have friends and family who teach. My sister is a teacher. I'm sorry, my niece is a teacher. My sister is a superintendent. I have an uncle who is a superintendent, now is an educational consultant. And when that tragedy at Sandy Hook happened, and you saw the fear on those children's faces, and then you also had the outcry of, what do we do? How does this happen? That was coming in from my family and friends. You want to help as best you can. And what I realized in that moment is that while not everyone will know the luxury of having their own protective detail, everyone deserves to be protected. And so what I wanted to do with my business was take that skill set that I had learned and was mostly being applied to that top 1% of the population, but then make those skill sets and strategies known to the other 99% so that I could help them to help themselves to succeed in staying safe. And so when we talk about the difference between what is a protective detail and what does a consultant do, the protective detail is providing the actual security framework, and a consultant is helping you to identify the risks you're most likely to face so that you can help to keep yourself safe.
Yeah. So would avoidance be like an overarching word you could attach to that kind of preparation? Like you want to avoid if possible?
Well, I think the overarching framework we want to prescribe is awareness. Okay. Because if we have awareness of the risks that are out there, avoidance is one of the safety traps that I talk about in the book, where it's like, hey, there's this concern. It's like when the warning light comes on in your car and you're like, I don't want to deal with that right now. And then what happens? The problem gets worse. But if you're aware of that, hey, like every 90 days or so, or every 2,500 miles, or every 5,000 miles, whatever it is, I know that my car's going to have to get changed. The oil's going to have to get changed. Mm-hmm. And you're proactive about getting that oil changed, then that light never has to come on. That anxiety never needs to set into your system, and the avoidance never needs to take place. So by knowing ahead of time that, hey, every 5,000 miles, your car is going to need an oil change. So at 4,500 miles, let's make that the time frame that gives us a window of opportunity to get that oil changed, so that we don't have to get to that next step of anxiety and going into the avoidance phase and not wanting to have to deal with it, and I don't have time, and blah, 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 which ultimately makes the problem worse. And you just take that exact same framework, but apply it to the everyday hazards that exist in our everyday lives.
Got it.
this topic is so timely right now because everybody is feeling a little more anxiety than I think they did not long ago. And clearly your preparations for this book and the writing of this book and then the audio recording of this book happened long in advance of the most recent things that have us all feeling a little anxious. But the timing being as it is, do you think that that the reality that exists out there is that we are more at risk as common citizens? Or should we feel safer now than a lot of us do?
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, and I talk about this in the book, if you had the choice to be born at any time in history, right now is the best time to be alive, right? Like medical advancements are never better, access to food, healthcare, everything in our world is the safest, quite literally the safest it has ever been. But what is also true is that targeted violence is higher than it's ever been. Active, mass violence, and not only just mass violence, but our media perpetrating that narrative onto us every day. It used to be that, you went home and you saw the 6 o'clock news and you heard about that one tragedy one time, and then you wouldn't hear about it again until you would hear the news the next day. Whereas now with the 24-hour news cycle and the advent of social media, you're getting that same tragedy broken down from various vantage points, and it's in your feed, and you're getting the hot takes, and you're getting the Twitter trends, and you're getting the Instagram stories, and you're getting it. So instead of having that one story told to you once, you're having that same story told to you 1,000 different ways in a very tight time frame. And when that outlook becomes internalized, it can make you feel that you are more at risk than you really are, which is not to say, and I would use it like as a kind of like the airport safety brief. Like, is there a chance that that plane is going to crash? Yes. Is it likely? No. And so the airplane, safety brief just kind of gives you the bare minimums of what you need to know. Trust the captain, trust the crew. If you want to live, follow me, so that you're not inundated with that fear every time you fly. But if every 10 minutes you had to hear that airline safety brief, you're like, I'm driving. I'm not taking that plane.
Yeah.
Right.
Good point.
Well, I'm going to ask
Spencer,
you a question. Oh, go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, along those same lines with the media and everything else, you're a military guy, I'm a military guy. At
Yes,
one
sir.
point in this year, there was a division in Washington, D.C., a division, 28,000 deployed American service members. Now there is a brigade.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? Is that a product of this inflamed media zeitgeist that they're doing? I mean, I can't understand why you would need a brigade in an area that small.
Well, because what I think you're seeing there is what, and that's security theater, right? What happens every time there's like a school shooting or a bomb threat or an attack and this is really the essence of the safety trap, is that something happens, there's this overarching response to that. We're going to put guards on the street. We're going to, if there's a break-in in a home or in a high-end residential area, the cops have those. The police department have the cops, patrolling that area. But do they have the cops patrolling the area during those times, like during the workday when those break-ins are most likely to happen? No, they have them patrol during commuting hours so that the residents of those homes see them, so that they feel like they're being safe. But they're actually, while they're then away at work, those patrols aren't taking place because no one's there to see them.
So I just want to pause real quick because you mentioned two terms that maybe others who are not, from the military understand. Pete, you referenced theater and brigade. Is that brigade is that's a large number, right? So to give people perspective, what's that number? And
so I think I'm sorry, Pete. Good.
No,
yeah, well, I mean, the brigade.
Well, no, what Pete was talking about that there was there was a division, and now it's down to a division. Think of like the 82nd Airborne Division. Okay. Right. That's a massive amount. I don't want to get, but let's say that's 100,000 people. It's not 100,000. But let's say it's 100,000.
It's like 28 to 35,000 people. That's what it is.
Right.
And then division is 5 brigades.
Right. 5 brigades. And so it's 1/5 of what it was on Inauguration Day.
Right.
But here's the thing. In a month, that's going to go from a brigade to a battalion. And then it'll go from
maybe
a battalion
1,000 or so people.
And then it'll go from a battalion to a company. and it'll go from a company to a squad. And all they're really doing is just, it's like one of those things like after a school shooting where it's like, hey, there's the politicians come out, we're going to do this, and we're never going to forget, and blah, 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 blah. And then a month later goes by and it's a little bit quieter. And then 2 months go by and it's a little bit quieter. And then a month later, it's like, and then everything returns to normal. And that's the safety trap. Our fears have been abated, but the risk remains, because what we're really doing is we're focusing on the reactive efforts rather than the proactive preventative measures that would keep that concern from happening again. What I would much rather see is someone doing their very best to bridge the verticals between the protective intelligence failures between FBI and state police departments and U.S. Marshal Service and judiciary protections to understand how that raw data can be better filtered into actionable intel so that those protective safeguards can be put in place before that march on the Capitol took place, rather than saying, oh no, they're on our side, they're all wearing, Blue Lives Matter, they're all saying, like, don't tread on me, they're not going to hurt us at all. And then what happens is you're caught so woefully, you're overconfident in your capabilities, you're complacent in your efforts, and it's one of those things where, listen, if you have an umbrella, if you're the Capitol Police security entity and you have an umbrella and every day you carry that umbrella because, hey, there's going to be a light rain or a light drizzle, that umbrella is going to be perfectly effective in keeping you safe underneath. The canopy of that umbrella is the security posturing. It's the overarching framework. And under that umbrella is the safety. So there's a difference between security and safety. But then if you expect that same umbrella to be as effective in a hurricane, like, that's just foolish. And I think what so often happens in these protective strategies, whether that's on the school level, on the local level, or the Capitol building at the national level, is we expect those same strategies that keep us safe every day to be those same strategies that will keep us safe in crisis. And that's just not the case.
For our listeners just joining us, listeners and viewers, Spencer Coursen is the author of The Safety Trap, a security expert's secrets for staying safe in a dangerous world. You can see a copy of the book right behind him there. And also with us today is our friend Shelley Klingerman, who authored the book Vigilance, the Savvy Women's Guide to Personal Safety, Self-Protection Measures, and Countermeasures. So what we're talking about today has to do with personal safety and preventative measures so that you can remain safe and be able to identify risk before things happen. So, Spencer, your experience is worldwide. You've had protective details take place all over the place. Do you see differences in violence dynamics across cultures? And do you see that any of the things that you've seen abroad are bleeding into our society now that we're in a pandemic and that we have these social dynamics that are a little different now?
Well, I think across the board, whether that's in Atlanta or in Afghanistan, or if that's in Boston or Beirut, what you ultimately see prior to the initiation of violence is a grievance. Someone has some kind of a grievance, whether that's a political grievance or an interpersonal grievance, or they've been fired from their job, or on a local level, it may be someone who has a grievance at school, or who has passed over for a promotion at work, or who has an interpersonal conflict with their boss. But then, like on the geopolitical level, it could be, hey, we don't like this ethnic group coming into our area. I'm talking about like the Sunnis and the Shia, or it could be we don't like what we saw in Syria, like with the insurgent concern. So I think while the vast spectrum of concern may change from an isolated local level to a more political global concern on an international level, may span a much more broad spectrum, the pre-incident indicators of grievance, of ideation, of research and planning, of attack, those attack vectors are all pretty much the same. And so I think that's really where the protective intelligence construct comes into play, whether you're the human resource at the school, the guidance counselor at the school, or the human resource person at the workplace, or if you're with the State Department and the regional security officer, or maybe someone in the FBI, like on the terror threat level nationally, looking at white supremacy concerns, or if you're taking that more internationally to the regional security officer or the CIA concerns, those same patterns in practice are the same patterns in practice that guidance counselors are using to keep schools safe. They're the same patterns in practice that financial institutions are looking for to detect fraud or embezzlement or financial crimes. And those are the same pre-incident indicators that the FBI is using at the national level, the same pre-incident indicators that our intelligence, the intelligence community is using at the international level. And so while the scope of that attack vector may change across that spectrum of concern, the reality is that all of those concerns start at an individual level. They start at an individual grievance, and then are they allowed to grow? Are they allowed to get oxygen? Are they allowed to permeate into other aspects of culture? And then are those insights being rewarded, or are they being shunned? Are people going to be like, oh, I can have my identity be based upon this? I mean, I think so many times in school shootings, what we're actually hearing is someone of lower emotional intelligence who doesn't know how to ask for help, and so who acts out in these violent ways. And so those gunshots are actually them saying, hey, can you hear me now? But on the international terror warning, what they're actually saying is, we have been subjugated and victimized and undervalued, and we have no identity. But by me being a martyr to this cause, that's something I can identify with, that my community will appreciate. My family will be bestowed, whatever, false narrative has been sold to them, but they believe it. And because they believe it, they're willing to act upon it. And I think so much of staying safe is about being able to identify those hazards of harm which hide in plain sight. And staying safe is ultimately about being able to see those warning signs. On a very individual level, we do not stub our toes on the things we notice. We stub our toes on the things we don't.
Perfect. I really like the use of pre-incident indicators. That's terrific. I'd like to get Shelley's take, because her book, which again is called Vigilance, The Savvy Woman's Guide to Personal Safety, Self-Protection Measures and Countermeasures, is specifically aimed at pre-incident indicators for women. And I'd like your take on pre-incident indicators and what our female listeners should be in tune to as they make their way.
Yeah. So again, my book was really based on personal experience of traveling by myself largely, and starting at a really young age, and not really knowing what I should and shouldn't be looking for. So a very quick story of something that was easily avoidable. I get off the airplane in LaGuardia. I'm by myself. It's probably late 90s. I'm late 20s. We'll just leave it at that. And I go out to the taxi line, and it's a mile long. And I, of course, I'm standing there, and here comes one of the car service drivers fishing in the back of the line, because that's what they do. And I know this now. Didn't know that at the time. And so I think I was maybe running a little late and needed to get into the city. So I accept a ride from one of those taxi drivers, or it was a car service. It wasn't a regulated taxi. So, again, I would think I was the last person, saw it was going to be like a 45-minute wait, because this was pre-9/11. So he offers a ride. I take it. He grabs my bag and starts walking ahead of me. So he's got my suitcase now, and we're walking, and now we're walking and walking, and now we're leaving the terminal because they park way out, in the long-term parking, what have you. So now I'm starting to think, okay, we're getting away from the terminal. He's ahead of me. He has my bag. I'm thinking now it was a pretty bad idea, but I did not have the tools on how to get out of that situation. So I am now just continuing to follow him. My hair on my arms is raising. Now I'm thinking, every car was the same. It was black Lincolns or whatever it was. I had no idea if there was anybody waiting at the car. Now I don't know if this guy is actually a legit driver. So that is the simplest thing that I could have avoided by saying no. I, at the time, really didn't know that that's what they did. They fished from the back of the line. Some of these are not, regulated car services. So, John, that's really one quick example. If someone would have said, as tempting as it is, because you don't want to wait in line, say no. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, it will save you a lot of anxiety and angst to just say no and wait. And so that was really the foundation and the reason for my book. Is there was a number of things that I found myself in cringy situations where I should have just avoided them altogether. There was no sense in me being in the situation I was, or no reason, had I just had a little bit of the awareness that Spencer talks about. And really what I wanted to do was park all of this information that I learned from my personal experiences. Something that I've done before the book was I did produce a documentary on school security, and it predated Newtown. But I had the absolute pleasure and honor to interview a number of subject matter experts that when the cameras would go off about the documentary, we would just talk like scenarios. And I think the tradecraft is really interesting. And I would run scenarios, and then they would say, well, as a female traveler, where's the position of power in an elevator? I got the answer wrong. Because no one had ever told me. It's pretty common sense when someone tells you, like, makes absolute sense. When no one tells you, you have no perspective whatsoever on how you should be looking at things. So I said you should be in the back of the elevator. I've since learned that you need to be by the panel, because that is literally the only place you can control what's going on. Those little tips, tricks, and tactics, I think are things that every female should be armed with. And again, the reason I did the book, personal experience, having the opportunity to talk to subject matter experts, and then wanting my girls to be more prepared than I was, because this world is a much smaller place than when I went out into the professional field, and they are going to be traveling internationally, and they need to have personal awareness, social awareness, environmental awareness, cultural awareness. And it's just something you have to be very intentional about. Otherwise, you will find yourself in a situation that you could have avoided.
You know, in addition to owning a security company, I operated a martial arts studio for 16 years, and we did focused defense classes that were aimed at female participants. The tough thing that I ran into, and I want to ask you about it, is a lot of these principles get better with repetition. Just like anything else, you put in the reps, you get better at it. How do people who read your book, and then I'll ask Spencer the same question, how do people read your book get the reps? I understand that feeling. We can all relate to that story, but you have to practice it to have your cockles raised sooner. So how do you suggest that women who are planning on traveling get some reps before they get into the airport?
Visualization, I think, is a really important tool that we can use. So you see yourself in that situation, and you have some things. What would I do if? You run those scenarios in your mind. I will tell you just flat out that some of the things that we are taught are just not effective. Like, I mean, it's a size, it's literally a size thing, and people don't pick on people bigger than typically. So there's already a size disadvantage there. So I that's not really my area of expertise. I am a 20-year yoga certified, so I can really make a connection between being mindful on the mat and being mindful in your environment. There's an easy connection. On the mat, you're noticing noticing smells and feels and such. In your environment, you're noticing what's going on around you, but it's a very intentional exercise. And then this just habits, good habits. Get in the habit of parking under parking lights. So even if it's daytime, just get in the habit. And that's kind of that rep maybe that you're talking about. I don't really go into the physical things, and I'll let Spencer probably talk more about that, because that's just not my area. But I think visualization, practicing it, and then teaching your kids, because there's no better way to learn something than teach it. So kind of reinforcing these things with your kids so that you're reinforcing it, and now you're introducing it to your kids. Yeah. Spencer?
I completely agree with what Shelley is saying, and I'll take what she's saying one step further. Their self-defense tools are great. Self-defense, martial arts, what have you, whether that's jujitsu or kung fu or Krav Maga or what have you. Like, self-defense tools are great, but a self-defense mindset is better. one of the most overarching factors of target selection by predators is likelihood of success. If, lions stalking gazelle in the wild don't go after the strongest of the herd, they go after the weakest. They are looking for someone who is on their phone, who doesn't know where they are, who is distracted, is discombobulated. One of the reasons that people are attacked, like Shelley was saying, in parking lots so often is because those are psychological transition zones. Those are areas where we are either reflecting back upon to what we were just doing, or we're projecting ahead to what we're going to do next. Did I remember everything that I came in for? Do I have enough time to make one more stop before I have to pick up the kids from soccer practice? And so we're very rarely in that present, in that now, in that mindful awareness space. And I think another thing is that we, not just as a society, but we as individuals have this tendency to oscillate between complacency and hypervigilance, between absolutely nothing is going to happen, or my head's on a swivel and we're frisking grandma at the ballpark. When the reality is that everyday safety requires everyday participation, and having a healthy sense of skepticism and a moderate dose of vigilance is all most of us need to stay safe in our everyday lives. There is people, I hear this all the time from clients when they're like, well, I don't want to live in fear. And there's a difference between being afraid and being fearful. When we are there's that old saying, no one fears that which they know well. And what that's basically saying is, if you allow yourself to be afraid, just a little bit afraid, just like when you're driving a car, are you fearful every time you get in your car that you're going to get in an accident, or that you're going to crash, or that someone's going to hit you? No, but you're just a little bit vigilant. You're just a little bit afraid enough because you know that you have the skill set to, if someone swerves into your lane, to get into another lane, to be checking your mirrors. You have that preparation, that skill set within you, and you allow yourself to be just a little bit afraid so that you can stay vigilant and aware and mindful of what's going on around you. The difference between being a little bit afraid in our everyday lives, which I would just say is a healthy sense of skepticism and a moderate dose of vigilance, and being fearful, is that when we're fearful, it's because we are unprepared we don't feel that we have the strategies to mitigate the risks of which may confront us. And so at that point, we're going to become more overconfident. Oh, I'll deal with that when it comes. Or we're going to be more complacent. Oh, that will never happen to me. This is a safe neighborhood. I'm at Whole Foods. I'm not at some corner bodega. Or I'm at, we're complacent. We're complacent, we're overconfident, or we avoid the reality of those risks could impact us. And so, one of my favorite, I don't know, do you guys watch the Marvel movies? Do you watch the Avengers?
Sure.
There's that one scene where, so in one of the movies, the Incredible Hulk, can't get the Hulk to come out of him. And he's almost impotent with this, because he's got this anxiety over the fear and who's in control of what. But then in I think it's maybe the first Avenger movie where Captain America, as the bad guys are coming down, and go, hey, Dr. Banner, you may want to get angry now because we're going to need the big guy. And he just kind of turns back to Captain America and goes, well, that's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry. And then he tears off his shirt and becomes the Incredible Hulk. And what he's really explaining in that sense was that Dr. Banner used to be so afraid of his inability to control the Hulk that he just shunned it. He pushed it back. He tried to live this life of avoidance. And then when he got afraid, or when he got angry, the Hulk would come in and take over. And what he realized, and what I think we can all kind of take away from that, is if we just learn to live with just that little bit of being afraid, that kind of keeps our engine in idle. It kind of keeps us, we're ready to go into drive. We're ready to go into reverse. We're ready to pivot left or right. We can go back. We can go forward. We can zig. We can zag. But if the car's not turned on, and we have to go from 0 to hero in a second, our likelihood of success is much likelier. And in those situations, we may not be a victim, but we're going to make decisions that are more aligned with victimhood. Where if we can just have that healthy sense of skepticism, that everyday dose of vigilance, if we can learn to live just being just a little bit afraid, just that pilot light in ourselves, much like Dr. Banner learned to just always just know where that anger is that can live inside you. Because sometimes being afraid can be good. Sometimes being afraid can sort of, it's that fear is often that next gear of being afraid that, kind of overrides us. But if we're just willing to just, and the more we expose ourselves, the more we allow ourselves to be, engaged in our world, every single one of us, when we buy something from IKEA, sees that beautiful dresser on display, but then we get home and there's 8 million pieces on the floor and some kind of like hieroglyphic inspired set of instruction in front of us. And we're like, what, I can't do this.
What do I do with this Allen wrench?
Right. Which isn't even an Allen wrench. It's some like Swedish interpretation of an Allen wrench. All due respect to the Swedes. Love your work. But then what happens? You start with one piece. You start slow, you build strong.
Mm-hmm.
And with each new piece that you put together, you get another sense of accomplishment. You get another sense of valuation. You get another sense of identity being bestowed that, yes, you can overcome. Yes, you are smart enough. Yes, you are strong enough. Yes, you are willful enough. And if we can just apply that same IKEA building framework to our everyday lives, like I'm not going to avoid this just because I don't understand it. Because the more I understand it, that's another skill that's put into my toolkit of safety. That's another strategy that I can employ on an individual level to help me and my family succeed in staying safe.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, Pete, for listeners just joining us.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead.
No, you go.
Do this in a second.
I'm going to go. To amplify what you're saying, Spencer, and also Shelley, I think when we call it self-defense, we're not putting enough thought into what all those things are, like the preventative part of defense, where you are more aware, like you're talking about keeping that pilot light on. And also, if you're looking at defense as being a physical altercation where the other person gets to decide when, where, and what to bring to the fight, you're in a bad position. And so you're always better off preventing that encounter from happening by being just, more scary than the next person that comes along. And then always, if you can break away and make distance, that's the best plan, because again, they have all the advantage, the planner's advantage, the advantage of surprise. And so that self-defense happens way before, just like Spencer was saying, by just being mildly curious about your surrounding, by being more engaged. You don't have to be afraid to be engaged in life and paying attention, and it's easy to fall into the trap of not thinking about what we're doing, but you have to do that. And that's that vigilance, right? You don't want to be vigilant to the point where you're distracting yourself and harming, going crazy around slapping people and everything. But you do want to be aware enough that you're like, I've walked by 5 different storefronts or whatever it is. You're keeping track of your day-to-day life in a way that is not harmful, but also creates some awareness for you that your average victim wouldn't have.
Yeah,
Pete, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot to what you're all saying. And the thing that I appreciate about having authors on the subject on the show is that you've created the vocabulary to articulate these principles so that we can all relate to these situations, but also engage them in a way that makes sense and allows us to put some practice to the principles. And just for our viewers just joining us, I just want to reiterate, Spencer's book is called The Safety Trap, A Security Expert's Secrets for Staying Safe in a Dangerous World. It comes out on May 18th in book form, in Audible form, and you should get it. You should listen to it. You should consume it however you can. But of course, Pete and I like local bookstores. So if you can get it on a local level,
so say we all.
By all means, do that. And Shelley's book is called Vigilance, The Savvy Woman's Guide to Personal Safety, Self-Protection Measures, and Countermeasures. And what we're talking about here is everybody's ability to stay safer and stay safe, but stay safer. And I think it boils down to principles of awareness of your surroundings and awareness of perhaps some of the intentions of the people around you and how to make yourself not be the easiest target, because a lot of times it boils down to, and this all wraps up into how to defend yourself. It all boils down to, if there's a better opportunity for somebody's ill intentions, they'll direct it that way rather than mess with, when you mess with the bull, you get the horns, as the old saying goes. So if you look like you might just be the bull, then perhaps those intentions get directed in other places, and that's as as much as we can do with. That's as safe as you can be, is to not be engaged at all. So as we get back to the topic of preparedness, though, let's make it from the very personal situations to the more preparation situations, let's say around the house or around the the office. What do you suggest, Spencer, for people who are looking around and saying, I'm maybe not ready for a discrete security detail to follow me around all the time, but I probably should be a little more aware of what's going on here and a little more prepared in case something does happen? What are some easy steps?
The first step I would say is to conduct an honest self-assessment of yourself. When I sometimes talk to my clients, whether it's about their own personal safety or their own residential safety, I'll sometimes ask them to, hey, if you were going to attack you, how would you do it? Where are you most vulnerable? Or ask your wife or ask your kids. If I was to come up to an average person walking out of the supermarket and say to them, hey, is your home locked up and secure? First reaction is going to be an instantaneous yes, right? Because whether they're either just trying to promote their own protective posture to a stranger, or whether that's just something that they internally want to believe, their first response is going to be yes. But then if I follow up that question and say, if I put $1 million in a briefcase on the master bedroom bed, could you get into your house within 10 minutes, get that briefcase out of the house without ever leaving any signs that you were there? They go, absolutely. Now, what changed between the first response and 10 seconds later, the other response? The first response was, I'm projecting safety. And the second question was, oh, wait a second. I know that the kids never lock the garage door when they come back in from soccer practice. I know that my wife hates it when I stink up the guest bathroom and always cracks that window. I can crawl in through there. I know that the patio door, if you just kind of jimmy it a little bit, it'll slide right open. And all of those ways that you know that you can break into your home are the exact same ways that a bad guy knows he can break into your home. Whether they were in there doing some kind of work, or it's something that you overshared on social media, or that something that you were having a conversation about and someone overheard it. All of those inherent vulnerabilities are the first line of defense that should be resolved, that should be made aware and should be resolved, because those are the first lines of defense that are going to be exploited by those with nefarious intent. So whether that is your personal life of your own agency, your home, your school, your business, or just what you do in life, taking an honest first assessment. And one of the things that I like to promote is, and I talk about this in the book, is the FOIL method. We all know about FOIL from math class, where we had to do like the palindrome or whatever. I failed math, so I don't really know what it was. But what I was always really good at was taking things that I learned in one application and applying them to another. So you know how in math it's first, outers, inners, lasts? Do that with your own life. What are my first impressions? What are the first takeaways when I look at me, or when I look at home, or when I look at my school, or when I look at my business? What are my first impressions? Okay, now I'm going to go to the outsides. What do the windows look like? What kind of car am I driving? What does the outside say about what I can do, or what are the takeaways that I can glean from looking at the outside? Okay, now let's move inside. What do I see? Is there security here? Are there windows locked? Is this blah 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 blah? Take a good inventory of that. And then L for last. What are the lasting impressions? What are the things that you can that kind of tweak in the back of your mind days, weeks later, that kind of go, oh yeah, why does that keep bothering me? I have a buddy of mine who's a rather successful comedian, and he always said to me, when I see something and then I think about it again, if I think about it a third time, I have to make a joke about it because I know that there's something there. And that same approach to joke writing can be applied to our everyday life. What is it? That little nagging voice in the back of my head that's warning me? Because that is your internal self-defense system telling you that something wrong. And if you avoid that, if you are complacent about it, if you're overconfident about your ability to respond to it when it does breach its ugly head, those are the vulnerabilities that we're trying to mitigate so that we can, again, ensure the certainty of safety for everyone involved.
Well, let me push a little further, because if I'm a person who's not used to examining myself and my surroundings that way, maybe I don't come up with the obvious ones. What are some of the common ones that you've seen that make people go, I had never thought of that?
So the best thing to do with that is, and this is why I talk about recruiting local assets. And I'll just use editing my own book as an example. I wrote these words. I framed the construction of the sentences and the paragraphs and the layout of the book. But after reading through that book 10, 15 times on edits, I go writer blind. So what do? I give it to a friend to read. Hey, what do you see? And sometimes when you just have that outsider perspective coming in, whether that's your kids or whether that's your neighbor or whether that's a trusted friend or whether that's a neighborhood watch, hey, I'll audit your house if you audit mine. And you develop that neighborhood, community. You establish that protective partnership with you and your colleagues who, whether it's in crisis, and what you may realize is like, hey, we just had this like huge problem here in Texas with the power and the water going out. But my neighbor and I had been talking about, she's got, deep freezers and I've got gas heat. So if I can use my generators to help her keep that food warm, I can cook the food, and together we can navigate through that crisis together. But if you're not having those conversations until it's too late, then it is too late to have those conversations. So you don't have to be a James Bond, Jason Bourne, Carrie Matheson, like skill set individual. You don't have to be like a former combat operative or a Navy SEAL or an Army Ranger. You just have to have a willingness to participate in your own protection. And that can start with just having the everyday conversations with yourself, with your loved ones, with your family, with your friends and your neighbors about ways to succeed in staying safe.
Yeah. And I just want to double click on that again. From a female's perspective, we need to hear it in bite sizes and reminded, because women are very programmed to be nice, to be approachable, to be kind. We don't want to embarrass. We don't want to humiliate. So it is really important for women to hear that, to have those conversations that Spencer's talking about, but to hear it over and over, that it's okay if you're in an uncomfortable situation to be rude, which is not natural to us, especially I'm, based in Indiana, Midwest, like we're all really nice. But in some instances, that's really not what you want to be. You want to be a bit of a bitch. And when you're talking about your foil, outside perspective, or perception of someone, women got to think about their body language. So, what you can do, what I do to my daughters all the time, I'm like, get your shoulders back, walk with purpose, be bigger than you are, because you both have mentioned it, or you've all mentioned it, that predators look for the weakest link. So, they're lazy by inherent. And again, they don't pick on people that they think are going to put up a fight. So just by holding your shoulders back and walking with purpose for women can be a big bump, that I like to call it in my book. I call it, you want to bump them. I mean, and it's unfortunate whoever you're bumping them to, but they have the opportunity to walk with purpose as well. I think the inside is having that confidence. Like, you cannot second guess, like, I don't really feel the vibe from this guy, but I don't want to be mean. Like, no, you need to shut it down immediately when the hair starts to raise or you start getting that sense. That is something that has to be constantly reminded. And it's really helpful when it comes from men, because you're giving women permission to be like, look, you don't have to stay in a conversation with some dude that's making you feel uncomfortable. Tell him to go F off. That is not our first reaction. So it is important for women to be able to level set with women, because we understand each other's situations. But it really is important for men in women's life to say, don't feel like you have to be in an uncomfortable situation. You have permission to get the heck out of that situation, or to be rude if you have to. We don't like to be rude. Sometimes it's okay. Like, we all have enough friends, probably. We don't need to make friends with this absolute stranger who's creeping us out. But you would be surprised at how many women remain in a really cringy situation that feels bad for them, but they don't want to make this creep feel bad.
Yeah. I'm sorry, please.
That's true. I'm going to say, just on behalf of the guys out there who don't have nefarious intentions, I know I can speak for Pete in this situation, and I think I can speak for Spencer too. If a woman out there is traveling, either the world or just from home to work, and I get bumped, I can take it. So by all means, ladies, if you're in a situation where you feel you need to bump away.
Yeah, and I don't want to be someone out there, fear mongering like everybody is out to harm you. They are absolutely not. But we know when people have
That's right.
bad intentions. We just are really uncomfortable being the ones to be mean. And that's really what it comes to. We don't want to be mean. And guys, if I've had conversations in mixed crowds, and if you see a female walking by herself and you're coming up behind her, I promise you, we're like, oh my God, there's somebody behind me. I know there is. I don't want to turn around because I don't want to embarrass them. I don't want to falsely accuse. So if you could just be like, we've had men share like, yeah, I totally understand that. So I I talk on my phone loudly so they know I'm not trying to sneak up. Some say, yeah, I always just call out, hey, don't want to alarm you. I'm walking up behind you. Like just something to let us know that you are not sneaking up. And that is immensely helpful. And, we need to teach our daughters to, some of these tactics, but we also need to talk to our sons and teach them like these. I don't think chivalry is dead personally. So I think some of these chivalrous things that we can teach our sons, because I have a son as well, are also helpful in just eliminating this whole issue.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that it helps us to, as we become more and more of a disconnected society and we have less personal interactions. I'm a big fan of personal interactions. When I walk into a restaurant, I will typically make friends with the people on the tables on either side of me. And it's not, in an effort to be overly friendly. It's just that, hey, if something goes on in here and all of a sudden everybody's alarmed at something, they can look at my table and say, well, those guys are okay.
Yeah.
Now what do we do?
Right,
together?
it's team building.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Spencer,
it's such a... No, please.
Please elaborate. I want to get your thoughts on the things that Shelley's saying.
No, I think what Shelley is saying is 100% correct. She's talking about two things. One is she's talking about promoting that protective posture that you will have a higher degree of success targeting someone else. It's not going to be me. And the other thing she's talking about is, and I have a whole chapter about this in the book about the safety trap of being too polite, where we are sometimes conditioned as a society, and I think more so women than men, to be polite, to be agreeable, to not rock the boat, to be passive, for lack of a better phrase. But so much of safety comes from just having a willingness to be disagreeable. And being disagreeable does not mean you need to be impolite, does not mean that you have to be mean, but I think sometimes people have a false understanding of what it means to be selfish. Selfish is not that you want to do this and I want to do that. That's being disagreeable. Selfish is when I don't want you to do what you want to do. I want you to do what I want you to do. That's selfishness. So by you saying that you don't want to do that, that's not being selfish. That's just being disagreeable. And when the more disagreeable you are, the more you are promoting your own, positive protective posture, the more you are showing that you are in control of your own agency, the more that you are not so willing to succumb to emotional decision making, but you're going to, react more logically, more in your own best interest, more you're basically standing up for yourself for what you want to believe in. And I would say that you could even take that one step further, where Shelley was talking about walking down the street and feeling that there's someone walking behind you, but you don't want to turn around to appear rude. There's nothing wrong with just looking around, looking them right in the eye and giving them a head nod. 9 times out of 10, that person who is coming up behind you is just someone else who is walking on the street behind you. But if that person is trying to assess your likelihood for being targeted, and you immediately take away their anonymity, that anonymity may have been the single most influential tool that they were expecting to have at their disposal to harm you. And when they see that you know them, you look them dead in the eye, and you can even go so far as to say, hey, red hat, hey, blue shirt, hey, which now says, hey, now not only can I identify you, but I can pick you out of a lineup. They may go, oh, hey, skirt, or hey, slacks, or hey, shoes, you know what I mean? Which means that they're just in a banter with you, which would go to your team building activity, but would also show that you are not in a position to be victimized, that you are in control of your environment, that you are in control of your agency, and that you are in control of your destiny. Because the more we take control and the more we participate and the more we are cognizant of our everyday, situational awareness, the less likely we are to be targeted or victimized by situations that we thought we had no control over because we relinquished that control to another rather than embracing them and adopting them for ourselves.
I'll go a step
like to
further
ask-
and say if I'm the person who's walking and gets identified that way, I appreciate and admire the
100%.
person who's that vigilant.
Good for you, right? 100%. 100%.
I
Pete.
wanted to ask Spencer if, it's great to have all this advice. Shelley works in the field. I've got a lot of work in the security space. John is an actual security person. You are too. What would you say, I'm going to start with you, Spencer, is your weakness right now? Like, where do you go, I really got to improve this? Because we all have something that we want to improve.
Me personally?
Yeah, your personal. Yeah.
From a safety perspective.
Yeah.
Overconfidence. I think that my global experience, my military training, my weapons and tactics training, my this, that, and the other thing, like, knock on wood, I've never been mugged. I've had people try to mug me, but you know what I'm saying? So I would say that my safety trap is overconfidence. But I also think that because I know that my safety trap is overconfidence, I am much more likely, like I have had my butt handed to me by guys half my size, and I have taken down guys twice my size. But I think, so I would actually say that's too. I don't want to be too polite because I'm worried that someone may be more John Wick than me. But I also don't want to be so overconfident that I'm afraid that I'm more John Wick than everyone, because God knows I'm not. There are the Tim Kennedys and the Jocko Willings out there that would take me to school. And I do not want to meet any of those guys in a dark alley when they're not on my side. So yeah, I would say my two would be being overly polite because I'm overconfident.
Shelley?
I kind of have two as well. One, I want to work more with firearms to get even just to continuing to raise my comfort level with them. That's just a personal thing. And then, to John's point earlier, I think women should have one go-to that they practice and they hone that skill. And whether that is your second nature to, if you are in close quarters, like if it's practicing taking the hand to nose or a knee, I think practicing one thing that's going to be your go-to that you can deliver is important. And I have a couple that I think I would do. And to my point earlier, I do run like scenarios in my head. If I were here, would I do this? I really want to get it down to one that would be my natural reaction. So if it's having the confidence in a split second to throw a hand to the nose and then turn around and get the heck out of Dodge, I would like to get better at having that muscle memory to this one thing that I'm confident delivering.
Hey, Pete, can I follow up on one other point to what your question was about?
Of course.
There is a great book by a gentleman called Pete Walker, which is called Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. And when I read that book, I, like most of us, have always understood, the flight or the flight mindset, that intrinsic fight or flight. But there's actually two more Fs, and one is fawn and one is freeze. And the fawns kind of like in high stress situations want to become more like people pleasing. And the other one is freeze, where in high stress situations, we kind of like freeze to understand. Now, some people are fight, some people are fight, then flight. Some people are fawn, then fight. Some people are freeze, then fight. There's a combination that all of us can understand. But if we expect ourselves to only be a fight or a flight, and then we realize in that high stress situation that we are actually a fawn or a freeze, which, to be quite honest with you, unless you have been stress inoculated into a high threat environment, you're more than likely to fall into one of the into one of the fawn or freeze categories. But knowing that, and knowing that that may be one of your default settings, but not knowing it, if you're expecting yourself to be a fighter or a flighter, but then all of a sudden you realize that you're in a freeze or a fawn setting, your likelihood of making decisions that are more in line with being a victim could have real life, life-threatening, consequence. And so many of these things, so many of these influences come from traumas we experience as a child. So while it is great to have these protective strategies at your disposal, I also understanding the framework of biological predisposition, of biological preparedness, of biological awareness, which is going to impact your physiological and your psychological well-being, are also important things to understand. Because to get back to one of the things that you were talking about in terms of what our weaknesses were, that was just something that I've only been exposed to like in the past 2 years or so, and it has really helped to reframe my threat management consulting.
Well, Pete and I went shooting a couple weeks ago, so I'm going to try and change the subject from what our weaknesses are. I'm going to tell our listeners what called Vigilance, a Savvy Woman's Guide to Personal Safety, Self-Protection Measures, and Countermeasures. And Spencer's book is called The Safety Trap, a security expert's secrets for staying safe in a dangerous world. Shelley's book is out in the world right now, and you can get it and enjoy it and learn from it. And you should. And Spencer's book comes out on May 18th, and you can pre-order it with your Audible credits if you're sitting on a mountain of Audible credits, as so many of us are. And the audiobook was narrated by him. And so I would say, without having heard a word of it, that everybody should go listen to it, because I know what kind of work that is, and I applaud that you did it. So for everybody out there listening or watching, stay safe, get these books. These books will help you prepare. And there's no better preparation than constant vigilance and continuing to prepare and work on it. So just like Shelley said, if you have a go-to move, you got to practice that go-to move, and you got to make it so that you commit it to muscle memory. Thank you both for joining us today. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you both.
A true pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to.